Welcome to Part 8 of our video history of Rossmoor. I am John Nutley, your guide on this journey into the past. We will be covering the period from 1985 through 1990. This is a period I have entitled Troubles, Tragedies, Trials, and Triumphs. It was a time in which various outside factors and inside confrontations created conflicts which resulted in changes in the philosophy and direction of our community. Let us move back to 1985 and look at the conditions in Rossmoor. The Globe site, which was once stood at the corner of Rossmoor Parkway and Tice Valley Boulevard, was a concern of the residents. It had been built by Ross Cortese as a symbol of the leisure world communities. It remained his property when he withdrew from the Rossmoor development. Now it had deteriorated and lost much of its charm. Old-time Rossmoorians still held it in fond memory. Santa Barbara Savings bought the property and proposed to build a small shopping center with a bank and a community center for use by Rossmoorians. Various opinions regarding the proposal were voiced. The traffic problem was a major concern. The bank's proposal, however, was turned down by the Walnut Creek Planning Commission. The Golden Rain Board declined to act as it was not within Rossmoor's boundaries. There was an issue that the board was concerned about. That was Measure M on the Walnut Creek ballot. Measure M would put a freeze on all new buildings until the traffic congestion in the city was reduced to a satisfactory state. The GRF board opposed the measure for its effect on new construction inside Rossmoor. The measure did pass. Fortunately, it provided that previously approved building permits would be honored. This gave hope to our builder. Within Rossmoor, a number of projects were proposed. The Golden Rain proposed a new clubhouse in the Junior Dollar area. As it would cost more than $250,000, a vote of the membership was required. It would fail to obtain resident approval. We will cover that in detail later in our story. More successful was a plan to increase the number of bowling greens to 3. This required the modification of the existing greens and the parking lot at Hillside. By late November, Bud could inspect the progress. It was not until October of 1986 that the new greens would be enjoyed. Several residents brought to the Golden Rain Board attention the dangers that exist from earthquakes and fire with only one exit gate. Members needed to know what to do in emergencies. A disaster preparedness committee was appointed to formulate a plan of action and to educate the residents to the proper responses to emergencies. The 3 major mutuals expressed their concern about the buildings and grounds. Third Walnut Creek Mutual was upset about the repairs and the conditions of the new buildings. The developers were targeted as the cause of the construction errors. By January of 1986, Third was making legal claims against UDC Homes. They could not agree on the amount of damage and the costs involved. They turned to an arbitration for solutions. It was to continue for several months. By September of 1986, a partial settlement was reached. Third received $271,000 for repairs to buildings. This was not to be the end of the struggle between Third Walnut Creek Mutual and UDC Homes. Second Walnut Creek Mutual continued to have problems with shifting earth and water seepage. At this time, repairs were underway at 3300 Tice Creek Drive. Slippage had forced the residents out while repairs were made. In October, they were able to return to their homes. Second also turned to litigation against the original builders for improper handling of the ground under the buildings. Earth movements, which seem to have plagued Second from the beginning, continued to be a concern throughout 1986. The biggest problems were in First Walnut Creek Mutual, the oldest and largest mutual. Previous programs, we mentioned the mutuals concerned about the repair, maintenance, and painting of the buildings. The mutual, not being satisfied with the work done by GRF employees, now appointed inspectors to check on the work contracted for. They were ignored by the GRF crews. That October in the elections, Howard Greenwald and Dan Hutchinson were elected to the Mutual's Board of Directors. Dan, for his experience on the Golden Rain Board, was elected president of the Mutual. But it was Howard Greenwald, Dee Graham, and Joe Brugger that were the controlling majority. By January of 1986, the trio proposed the termination of the management agreement with Golden Rain for management services. They requested that discussions be held with Golden Rain to resolve building defects. At the monthly meeting, the board voted to terminate the agreement on April 30 by a vote of 3-2. It was hoped that the resolution could be reached before that date. A meeting with over 200 residents in attendance was held to explain why. Golden Rain's reaction was voiced by President Paul Warnick, quote, "There is a lot of unhappiness about the way things are being done." Cecil Riley, the administrator, called it one of the most important events in the history of Rossmoor. First Walnut Creek Mutual requested inspection by FHA HUD regarding the complaints and conditions. In the following months, it followed the step-by-step procedures for termination of management services. This would not remove the members from participation in the Golden Rain Foundation. First Walnut Creek Mutual hired its own attorney, Dom Campisi, to formalize the list of complaints. They also called for bids for management services from outside agents. This preceded a group of residents forming a task force to seek recall of the trio. Separate votes were required for each board member. The votes failed. Joe Brugger, Howard Greenwald, and Dee Graham were victorious as a result of their holding the proxies for non-voting members. First Walnut Creek Mutual presented a 94-page statement of charges. Golden Rain responded with 382 pages of counterclaims. It was obvious that there would be no immediate resolution. Caldwell Banker was hired to handle First Walnut Creek management services. They began by soliciting bids for various maintenance tasks. It was becoming known that aside from improper maintenance, First Walnut Creek Mutual was concerned about 1, the quality and application of paint, 2, the commingling of funds of the mutual with those of other mutuals and the Golden Rain Board, 3, charges for work done were not specified, the dual role of Golden Rain Foundation and the management services had to be separated, and 5, the joint mutual board must cease to allocate mutual funds. These points were to be discussed, argued, and fought over in the courts and the community meetings for years to come. Let us look at other concerns of Rossmoor. Del Valle and Parcel 7. In our previous episode, we talked about Terra California's promise to develop the 5th clubhouse for Rossmoor as part of the settlement agreement. Now that Acalanes School District was putting up the site for sale, both UDC Homes and the Rossmoor community became excited at the possibilities. An agreement was made with Lincoln Properties, UDC Homes, and JFK University to buy the campus. With the passage of Measure M by the city of Walnut Creek, Lincoln Properties withdrew from the agreement. They would have to wait to develop the property and therefore withdrew. Golden Rain Foundation stepped in and proposed to buy the gymnasium area for $50,000 and renovate it for $3 million. This would be far less than the cost of a new structure and pools. UDC Homes would buy the rest of the property for homes and condominiums. The classrooms would go to JFK University. As usual, there was a mixed response from Rossmoor. By September of 1986, UDC was prepared to spend $40 million on Del Valle. It was already committed to new construction on the east side and at the south end of the valley. Just when Rossmoor would get its fifth clubhouse was still uncertain. In February of 1987, JFK announced it would spend $1.75 million for the 10 acres of classrooms. Then UDC Homes proposed to build a nursing facility on Golden Rain Road. Rossmoorians liked the idea of a nursing facility, but were concerned about all the non-resident traffic through the gate. Walnut Creek approved the nursing facility. A big ad appeared in the Rossmoor News announcing the plans. A new voice then arose. Manor Care proposed to build a nursing home across from the post office and medical center. The first sketch of the new development soon appeared. But just when everything seemed to be in place, JFK University dropped out of the proposed purchase. To counter that, Manor Care suggested that it operate the planned nursing facility inside Rossmoor. After a series of discussions with UDC Homes, it was agreed that Manor Care would switch parcels with UDC so that it would have one with access to Tice Valley Boulevard. This left Rossmoor with the gym area. UDC Homes got the playing field area and the parking lot for Lakeshire, Devonshire, and Waterford. Manor Care got Parcel 6, and Acalanes was left with Parcel 7, the L-shaped piece of land that included the classrooms. In late April, GRF proposed that it purchase Parcel 7 as expansion for the workshops and art studios. There would even be room for service and maintenance shops. This 20.4 acres would round out the community. The question of money for the purchase was discussed. The debate began on whether the classrooms were really needed. It would require a vote of the members, as the bylaws required a $250,000 limitation. A vote was called for to spend up to $5 million for the purchase. When the votes were counted, 2,829 yeses defeated 1,577 noes. In October of 1988, they submitted a bid of $3 million for Parcel 7 in joint agreement with the city of Walnut Creek. Walnut Creek would get the theater. Acalanes considered the various possibilities, and many governmental commissions and committees began their investigation. Golden Rain Board even submitted its remodeled plans for the gymnasium. Then Walnut Creek dropped from the agreement because of the report of unstable soil along Tice Valley Boulevard. Rossmoorians then besieged GRF with their concern about earthquake safety. Finally, in January 1990, GRF withdrew its offer for Parcel 7. So today, in 2003, Parcel remains with the Acalanes School District. The Creekside Clubhouse. For a long time, the Golden Rain Board had concerns for the Junior Dollar area. The building was old, and little had been done to it since it had served as a medical facility. temporary buildings were the home of the news and public safety. The service yard for the golf course and its clubhouse were inadequate. In February 1986, Cecil Riley, in his management memo, proposed a 5-year plan of capital projects. Not much was done until the following year because of the conflict with First Walnut Creek Mutual. In May of 1987, the Golden Rain Foundation drafted a plan for Junior Dollar. It voted $175,000 for a preliminary study. Because of the $250,000 bylaw limitation, it moved slowly, seeking public support for its plan. In January, the plans were presented for the development of the new Creekside complex. The residents were requested to vote. It called for $3.5 million to improve the property. The money would come from new member fees. The Rossmoor Residents Association had a number of questions regarding the development and its effect on the financial status of the community. A rebuttal argument soon appeared in the news. The GRF board held a public meeting on the issue. Resident opinions seemed to be divided. The architect's rendering made an encouraging picture of the future. When the ballots were sent out, they included a recommendation for a yes vote. This was immediately protested by the Rossmoor Residents Association. The results of the balloting were disappointed to GRF. 2,396 voted no, and only 1,832 voted yes. The plans for a new vote on Creekside Complex were put aside. In February of 1989, it was far down on the list of proposed improvements. Court of Flags canopy and the 25th anniversary. On a more positive note was the development of a canopy for the Court of Flags. In the early days, the Court of Flag was used as a community assembly area. The concrete slab had a wooden stage at one end and a flight of steps at the other end. On 3 sides were sloping lawns. Among the functions held there were All States Day, the Full Light Fair, bazaars, auto shows, concerts, and artistic performances. During the hot summer days, the heat of the sun was reflected off the concrete. It became so unbearably hot that residents would take their chairs and move on to the lawn, leaving the artists to play to an empty house. In the summer of 1986, a canopy was purchased as a solution. The question now was, would the canopy be ready for the 25th anniversary party? Plans for the anniversary were discussed in June. A fundraising drive was begun. Donations came in. There was going to be a parade. Frank Hardcastle, who had been chairman of the Rose Parade in Pasadena, began its organization. Calls went out to school bands, marching groups, Rossmoor clubs, antique car buffs, etc. By the beginning of September, the 25th anniversary schedule was set, and the canopy would be installed. The parade route was set, cars would be redirected. Rossmoor News had a special edition on Rossmoor and its history and organizations. The September 27th issue showed pictures of the erection of the canopy. More pictures of the parade appeared in the October 4th news. The History Center has a complete parade in pictures. With our buildings made of wood, fires have always been a danger. It seemed that a fire or two occurred every year. There was a serious grass fire in 1985. In 1986, a fire in Cactus Court damaged 5 units. Then it came a fire in the maintenance shop. Fire Chief William Maxfield spoke up for the need for a fire station closer to Rossmoor. A list of fires was printed in the Rossmoor News. Once again, there was renewed interest in a fire station nearby. In 1986, cable television was available in the manors. In 1987, the Rossmoor Art Studio at Gateway got its extension, and the farmers' market was begun. Renewed interest in the Sakhalin Indians developed when Indian relics were uncovered during the enlargement of the detention basin. The Lions Club continued the White Cane Day to raise funds for the blind. The old barn that existed from the turn of the century was pulled down as a danger to the residents. Thursday's Fun Day and Friday's Lunch had its volunteers and regular attendees. Field trips and excursions continued. Golden Gate Field and A's baseball games were well attended. Some of the activities outside of Rossmoor of interest to the community were the plans for the beginning of a new 24-680 interchange. Olympic Boulevard was to be widened. John Muir Hospital was enlarged by the addition of a new building, and there were plans for a regional center for the arts. It is nice to see that life goes merrily on in Rossmoor in spite of the turmoil, trials, and tribulations. Activities were triumphant in Rossmoor. GRF in the mutuals continued. Let us return now to the mutuals and their continuing troubles. It is interesting to note that all the mutuals during this period have been facing troubles of a challenging nature. Yet we now know that with common sense and cooperation, they emerged triumphant. Third Walnut Creek Mutual had gained $271,000 as its first part of the settlement from UDC Homes for building defects. In October, a settlement of $2.5 to $4 million was proposed. Discussions commenced and continued into the next year. They were still talking in June of 1987. When the arbitrator would present a decision was unknown. While these discussions were going on, Third tried to bring Mutual 48 into its fold. There was mixed reaction in the Mutual. Because of Third's problem, Mutual 48 voted to remain independent. It was not until the next year that the settlement looked imminent. In March, the agreement was reached. Third was to get $4.3 million for construction defects in projects 46, 47, and 49, plus additional funds for rot repairs for a total of $6 million. Independent Mutual 48 was assigned $1 million from UDC Homes. Even with this large amount, it was necessary for Third to assess each manor $100 a month for repairs. Thus, by the beginning of 1989, Third Walnut Creek Mutual had $7 million plus the contributions from the manors to make the necessary repairs. In Second Walnut Creek Mutual, their principal concern continued to be slippage and seepage. It spent time seeking ways for the correction of the problems. When all seemed well, a new slippage would appear to affect housing and utilities. First continued its disagreement with the Golden Rain Foundation and the Joint Mutual Board. By June of 1986, it had its own management agency in Caldwell Banker, its own lawyer, and was requesting office space from Golden Rain. The Camellia Room was to be its new office. The existing controversy was to grow when Golden Rain's budget for 1987 was announced. First immediately rejected the budget, claiming that funds were charged to the wrong accounts. Too much was charged to GRF, in which First shared, and too little to Mutual shared, of which First was not a member. A full review of the budget was scheduled for October. GRF made some changes, but First was not completely satisfied. First now took an action which would lead to legal suits. They decided to withhold their part of the questioned GRF budget assignment. GRF reacted by suing First for the missing fees. Each side claimed they were right. HUD, Housing and Urban Development, then stepped in. It stated that GRF had failed to obtain HUD's approval before taking legal action. GRF complied, and a hearing was set for June 15. In an attempt to reconcile, this date was set aside. They reported to HUD the next month that no settlement was reached. The lawsuit continued. Budget preparations by both sides showed large increases. GRF needed to meet the other mutual's need without first support. First increased its funds to make the necessary repairs stated in its original claims against GRF management. A sudden election surprise changed in the membership of First Walnut Creek's board. Elwood Denton replaced Joe Brugger, and the minority became the majority. Dan Hutchinson, the strong supporter of GRF, became president with the support of Denton and Hutlett. He set out to undo the work of Greenwald, Graham, and Brugger. Then in January came the ruling from Judge James that First Walnut Creek Mutual's petition did have sufficient measure to warrant a trial. The two litigants now awaited the opportunity to trade blows in the courtroom. The date was set for October. This would be after First's next election. As candidates vied for a place on First board, D. Graham died late in September, too late to be included in the current election. The new board was to choose his successor, Manny Kessler. The election results showed many changes. What was noted was that Al Labarth had defeated Dan Hutchinson. Resident support had switched to the new movement, but Hutchinson did not leave without blasting Coldwell Banker. With these departures, changes came quickly. Resignations and replacements created a united front. All were supporters of Coldwell Banker and independent governance. With Dom Campisi back as the mutual's attorney, they were ready for a settlement conference on January 20th, 1989. The hearing before the judge was unsatisfactory because of that, the trial was set for June 24th. The decision was to hire a retired judge, Subraw, to preside at the trial, and it was so arranged. When this court convened, only 30 residents attended. Most of them were witnesses or legal staff. Roger Hughes represented Golden Rain Foundation, and Don Campisi represented First. Arguments were heard regarding the budget process, breach of trust, and maintenance services. Campisi pleaded First's case by pointing out that the trial was about money and responsibility. The poor paint was accepted as an issue. After several weeks, the trial concluded with a tour of some of the buildings under discussion. The judge's decision came in late October. Basically, what First was to receive $660,000. GRF was directed to revise its accounting methods. The equipment fund had to be reassigned. GRF was to stop mingling the mutual funds with the foundation's fund. There was a definite conflict in GRF's dual role as foundation and management agent. It was noted that GRF had failed to follow proper procedures in the preparation and the painting work of buildings. In essence, all of the points which First Walnut Creek Mutual cited in its original claims of 1986 were accepted by the court. Golden Rain then faced the question, should it appeal? It was decided to wait until the final decision was presented. To meet the requirements of the court, GRF raised the coupon for 1990 by $3.09. As the year came to an end, the lawyers were busy dissecting the claims and resolving the arbitration decisions. On January 19, 1990, they met with Judge Subraw to discuss the final decision. It was issued on April 4th. In addition to what was stated above, GRF was to pay first $268,000 plus interest at 6%. For defective paint, an additional $159,000. The $660,000 was to go to the residents of First. First was ordered to return to GRF the $286,000 it held in equity. Cecil Riley, who had served as general manager for 11 years and led the fight against First Walnut Creek Mutual, now resigned. His initial years saw many changes for the veteran Rossmoor, but it was obvious that he was disappointed by the judge's decision. This is a place where we will end this episode of the video history of Rossmoor. It was a turning point in the relationships between Golden Rain Foundation and the Mutual. There was a new respect among the governing bodies. Thank you for watching.